All right. So our project is on algae biofuels, and I'll start us off with the history. So production of methane gas from algae was proposed in the early 1950s and received a big impetus during the energy crisis of the 1970s, when projects were initiated to produce gaseous fuels such as hydrogen and methane. From 1980 to 1996, the U.S. Department of Energy supported the Aquatic Specimen Species Program, also known as the ASP, a relatively small effort which had $25 million accumulated in almost 20 years. So with the specific goal of producing oil from microalgae. So faced with financial constraints and cheap oil, in 1995, the DOE made the decision to terminate the program. Global demand for transportation fuels, concerns about peak oil, increasing impacts of atmospheric CO2, the United States increasing importation of fuel, and the energy security risks that come with that, has fueled a rebirth in the interest of biofuels in general and algae-based biofuels in particular. Most of the algae research and commercial production have been in the United States, with more than 100 startups and large corporations along with the U.S. government investing billions in this new industry, the U.S. leader in advanced algae-based biofuels. However, new algae biofuels are also being researched around the world in both developed and developing nations in Europe, Asia, and elsewhere. All right, Sophia, passing it to you.
Thank you, Brandon. This is the conversion of algae. The conversion starts with carbon dioxide, nutrients, and sunlight. This is how algae is grown. It is then harvested, dewatered, and it can either be extracted or fermented. If algae oil is extracted, then it can be turned into biodiesel, and if it is fermented, it can be turned into bioethanol.
Nice. This is the cause and effect of the environmental issue on an ecosystem. With our increasing population and expanding economy, there will be an increased fossil fuel use. This will increase the CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. Algae have less of an impact on the environment than terrestrial resources of biomass do. They have a positive effect on our environment because they help counter climate change. Petroleum and other fossil fuels are too harmful to the environment in bulk, and algae biofuels can counter this pollution's rise.
Problem and solution. One of the main points of friction in the lipid extraction component of algae biofuel production is the need to remove all moisture from the algae in advance, leaving a dry powder from which the lipids can be separated. This is part of the reason that it often requires more energy to power the process than the resulting fuel provides at the end of the other equation. However, a new method invented by researchers at the University of Utah may have a solution to the energy parity conundrum. A term of chemical engineers have developed a new jet mixer technology that precludes the need for energy-intensive drying processes. The new mixing reactor shoots jets of solvent into jets of algae in liquid suspension, creating the turbulence needed to prompt the lipids to transfer into the solvent stream. Not only does this process require much less energy, the researchers say it is also faster, with lipids extracted in mere seconds.
That was a very good problem and solution, but I want to throw out one more. So, the cutting of forests in order to create land available for the growing of biofuel crops would have a grave impact on greenhouse gas reduction, as well as on biodiversity, land erosion, and the availability of wood for housing and other local necessities. In the sugarcane area of Pernambuco province, of only 2.5% of the original forest of the sugarcane region remains. Although it should be noted that this occurred over a number of years as a result of sugarcane development both before and after the development of biofuels. So the solution would be measures should be adopted to prevent the deterioration of land use for biofuels through monoculture utilization. A variety of management practices, such as the use of biochar, which is a specific process to reduce contamination and safely store carbon, intercropping, crop rotation, double cropping, and conservation tillage can reduce soil erosion, improve soil quality, reduce water consumption, and reduce susceptibility of crops to pests and disease, thereby reducing the need for chemical fertilizers and pesticides. It is important to note that these benefits are only gained if sufficient soil cover, mostly from crop residues, is left on the ground. So, Sophia, back to you.
Thank you, Benin. These are the pros and Thank you, Benin. These are the pros and
No
cons
problem.
of algae biofuels. The pros are algae production would minimize land use. Waste streams can be remediated by algae production. Flue gas of coal or municipal wastewater can be remedied, and algae can reduce carbon dioxide. And algae are responsible for more than 40% of the global carbon fixation. The cons are algae biofuels have a complicated production chain and they require major nutrients to grow. The major nutrients required by most algae include phosphorus, nitrogen, iron, and sulfur. If algal biofuels were to completely replace petroleum in the USA, an additional 53 million tons of phosphate must be acquired annually.
Oh, thank you. Now onto the production chain of algae biofuels. It starts off in the strain development. This is where bioprospecting, genetics, and breeding occurs. Then off to the input, where CO2, water, nutrients, and sunlight are added to help the algae grow. Then off to production, where pond design, water management, and crop protection. Then onto the harvest, where it is dewatered, and so that you can just get the algae. And off to co-products, and through fuel extraction, which splits off into pre-refining and residual biomass. After this, it is refined, and is turned into either gasoline or diesel jet fuel.
Very well said, Austin.
I got it. How petroleum industry feels about biofuels, environmental drawbacks. Companies like ExxonMobil are currently making new innovations in the petroleum industry to try and reduce their environmental impact. ExxonMobil is using algae as another source of their biofuels. Produced in brackish water, including seawater, algae production will not strain freshwater resources the way ethanol does. Passing the torch to you, Brennan.
Thank you very much. So let's talk about the process of fermentation and distillation. So fermentation is the metabolic process that produces chemical changes in organic substrates through the action of enzymes. In biochemistry, it is defined as the extraction of energy from carbohydrates in the absence of respiration. And distillation is the process of separating the components or substance from a liquid mixture by selectively boiling and condensation. Distillation may result in essentially complete separation, which is nearly pure components, or it may be a partial separation that increases the concentration of selected components of the mixture. In either case, the process exploits differences in the volatilities of the mixture components. All right, Sophia.
These are the costs of consumers. The current estimates of algae-based biofuels ranges from $300 to $2,600 US per barrel. Technical hurdles need to be overcome to improve this price. The initial selling point of algal fuels will most likely be twofold higher than petroleum, but the environmental costs will be substantially lower than our current strategy of depending on fossil fuels. With sufficient expression and economic purification, the price gap between fossil fuels and algae-based biofuels can be minimized.
Wow, well said. Now onto the prediction of future algae biofuel costs chart. We'll give you minutes to look at it.
Current use, if any, in automobiles. The most common types of biofuels that are used include ethanol and biodiesel. In order to adapt biofuels into everyday life, however, we must figure out how to make them cost less to process, create less emissions, and make it less expensive than the regular fossil fuels. For the moment, these are the three major setbacks for biofuels today. One small setback for biofuel is that it does not work well in colder conditions and can clog up fuel filters.
You know, we've talked a lot about algae biofuels, but how would this affect the average family? Well, this would actually not affect the average family very much. The prices would be elevated at first, but the average family can afford such gas price fluctuations. The small amount of money would be a small price to pay for the benefits algae biofuels would have for the environment. It would take many years to cross over. This transition cannot happen overnight. There are many challenges that need to be dealt with in order to fully change the way we live. Any significant change is difficult on a large scale. We must find an alternative to fossil fuels if we want to help our planet. Sophia, throwing the ball back to you.
Okay, thank you, Brennan. This is the importance of algae in ecosystems. Algae are incredibly important to our global ecology and biogeochemistry. Many algae are involved in symbiotic relationships with other organisms. For example, corals and sea anemones involve symbiosis between cnidarian animals and single-celled dinoflagellate algae. Coral bleaching represents the loss of the algae and their pigments. Another example would be lichens, which are symbiosis between fungi and algae. Without algae, the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere would be even higher than it already is.
Very well put, Sophia. And Austin, if you would like to say